Hello Friday Sports Show here on Flow FM, and we're going to change tact a little bit now and bring to light the issue of clubs and leagues that are struggling across our Flow FM network as a result of a lack of volunteers and administrators, and this all bears a striking resemblance to the Mallee Football League, which folded very much unfortunately, and it was so sad to see. But Jenna Allen, who plays for the Wyche-Narraport Club in the Northern Areas Netball League, is going to tell us a little bit from her perspective how difficult it is sometimes with trying to get some extra hands on board at the club. Jenna, we'll get right into it. Welcome to you. Just tell us what it's been like for your club this season.
Yeah, no, look, pretty good. We did do a lot of administrative reflecting, I suppose. All clubs within North Central, we met a lot more than what we regularly do towards the end of the season, and it's always hard. It's a busy time. Everyone's very focused on finals and on-court performance. But I think collectively at the start of the year, we found it really hard to engage our volunteers. So as we built towards the latter end of the year, and we sort of were also trying to find our way back into finals and what we had to do and all that sort of thing, we really felt just that really strong sense of volunteer disengagement, and the ones that had very much walked away. Like, we knew and announced that there was an umpire shortage, for instance, but in terms of everything else from an administrative level, our league really felt it, being so remote. So we did have a lot of extra meetings. We felt our management structure probably needed a bit of self-assessment on how we currently do things. We've set up in a way that is alphabetically rotated, and the committee of management for the whole association has been from one club each year. So upon reflection, we sort of felt like we were potentially missing opportunities from not having a more continuing executive year to year. By the time you sort of get into it and sink your teeth into it and know what you're doing, then technically you're sort of handing over. You're getting on top of one thing and then moving on to the next, and there wasn't sort of a chance to improve or do anything new. So we've been investigating a board of management structure going forward, and we've had lots of meetings in the last few weeks. And with the help of Carol Cathcart from Netball Victoria now, we've drafted a new constitution, and we've put together a new structure, and we're hoping to sort of finalise that in the next few weeks, which is pretty exciting.
So, Jenna, you might have heard news across the border in South Australia that the Mallee Football and Netball Leagues is dissolving as a result of a number of issues, but one of those has to do with a lot of the things you just touched on there. So, I mean, this isn't just sort of an imaginary talking point that comes up here and there and rears its head whenever, whenever no one's sort of expecting it. This is real, and there's an example of what it can all lead to not too far away from where you girls are in your respective leagues. So have you sort of touched on that at all, the fact that, the danger is real, and this really is a problem that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, because these country leagues, a lot of them are just hanging on with all the casualties we've seen as a result of COVID and people being too stressed out to want to lend their time to voluntary causes. So it is very real, the situation we're in, and it's good that you're being proactive about it, but the example across the border must surely come into it for you.
Yeah, it definitely does. We were keeping an eye on that, and also keeping an eye on, amalgamation. I mean, you've got to heavily advertise any potential votes for amalgamation and any sort of talks and negotiations with the presence and expectation of the public across social media now. As a club and as volunteers, it's quite stressful, especially when you are weighing up the future of your club and the future of your people and your communities. I think in bigger regional centres, sporting groups and clubs and even leagues or associations tend to forget the impact of a club or a league dissolving on small farming communities. So as our farms have expanded and gotten bigger and our populations have sort of seemingly fluctuated, the impact of sport or traditional sport in these areas is really crucial. So we very much identified throughout the year that, particularly with the announcement from the Quambatook Football Netball Club, the prompts for help after the fact were a little bit disappointing, to be honest, because in our case, in Wyche-Narraport's case, it's no secret we've had ongoing amalgamation talks for years now, and not so much as a result of us being in a really dire state, but more so trying to be proactive and trying to, predict junior numbers for the next 10 years and realistically what's going to happen with leagues across Victoria. Where do we sit geographically, and, how do we sort of look to make sure that our community and our farming region is supported? So we've still got businesses. It's amazing the impact that sport has across the board. So I think really important to keep on top of what leagues and communities are doing what. And we, as a North Central Netball Association, came at the fact, with the help of AFL Central Victoria, that we really needed to be proactive. As AFL Central Vic have a really broad reach, and we don't have the Netball Vic presence on a regular basis up here. So we need to be proactive in a lot of ways. So, things like Netball Academy, and, we're always geographically disadvantaged. We've got parents taking kids out of school early just to go to academy training and take them to tryouts. And, there's a lot involved for the ones that do live in isolated communities, but they're also the ones that are putting in everything, and they're, working really, really hard to keep their clubs going. So we really do need to be a bit inventive, because funding doesn't come easily to traditional sport anymore. You've got to have a new idea. There's got to be a new project. You've got to hit a group that a lot of the time just isn't there in number. So if we're talking about, funding applications to hit minority groups in areas like the Mallee, for instance, they're just not there. Whereas we've got small and really passionate community groups, but the funding guidelines don't meet the need, and then it sort of slaps you in the face, because the name of the project really screams at areas like ours that really do need volunteer support. There were lots of studies after COVID to talk about and support the fact that volunteers need long-term investment into rural and isolated areas. And it would be great to see things supported, simple things. I don't think sporting clubs want a lot. We just want to run our sport like we always have, but we can't get funding for things like public toilets anymore because it's not attractive unless it hits all of their funding guidelines, which in places like up here, we don't, generate the amount of, or our population doesn't support a lot of those guidelines. So it's sort of a catch-22 a lot of the time. So I think it's really important to be proactive, think outside the box. We've got to be strategic, and we've got to be planning for 10 years, because otherwise we're just, for those of us that are on farms, we need the community to help support our lifestyle and make sure that, we're all sort of in it together, I suppose.
Jenna, you've spoken really, really well there. I hope those words ring around the country, certainly at least in our Flow FM network. But before we let you go, I want to throw one more thing at you. Just budgetary-wise, a lot of the time when it comes to the volunteer aspect, or the lack thereof of volunteers, you get clubs just sort of shrugging and saying, well, what do you expect us to do? No one wants to step up and help. Now, what I'm going to throw at you, and I don't know exactly how well-versed you'll be to answer this, but just in a budgetary sense, we've had the debate often pop up even before COVID about, are senior players in some country leagues perhaps earning a little more than they should? Is there a last resort that's available to clubs in your view, whereby perhaps it might make sense for a few players to take less in their match fees, and for the club to then designate that money to a paid part-time administrator that can be across a number of club issues? Perhaps it might be a high school student that's looking for a part-time position, or something suitable along those lines. Is that some sort of mechanism that might come into effect in your view? Because if the funding doesn't become available in any other way, then what other means is there when it comes to manpower?
Yeah, and this probably comes back to my opinion on this is really quite strong. We're looking, in the past, we've always looked at offering remuneration to volunteers, and it's always the same ones who are doing a lot of the work, and we want to reward pretty much each other for the work that we're doing and the hours that we're putting in, because you do see significant burnout as the year goes on. Winter sport is a long duration, and if you're not getting any support, or if you're putting in hours and hours of in the instance of funding applications, to get things like public toilets, which is just ideally a given. And it's a given expectation when people come to our facilities that they want those sorts of things. We've got volunteers doing everything and putting in multiple applications and doing that and not getting anything back. We've always offered remuneration, and those that are doing the work never take it. So from a regional perspective, we've got to really make sure that we look after ourselves first. By the time they do notice and come back to us, we're ready for whatever we can sort of get to help bolster our participation.
Jenna Allen from the North Central Netball League. It's been a poignant and powerful discussion, and I'm really glad to have been able to have it with you. Really thankful for your time, Jenna. We will certainly keep across this, as you can imagine, and we'll speak with you again soon. Thanks so much and all the best.
No worries. Thank you.
Well, up next here on the Flow Friday Sports Show, we'll check in with Dale Farley, the Peak Football and Netball Club president in the Mallee in South Australia, which will be no more, sadly, going into 2023. We'll find out a little more about that as well. Plenty more to come here on the Flow Friday Sports Show.